The largest bank in the world just caught bribing its clients. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard, as the Ainslie Group celebrates 50 years. Today, we welcome back Branko, who's been looking into a very large US bank, which has been behaving very badly. How are you going today, Branko?
Good, Chris. Can you talk about today's topic and rant about some corruption? I like your background, by the way.
Yeah, a little bit of a different background today. Sunny Melbourne, as you can see, I came from sunny Brisbane down to sunny Melbourne for the day. Um, Same weather seems to follow me wherever I go at the moment. So what were you talking about today? You had JP Morgan as the bad guy. Lots of unsavory behavior going on. Give us a little bit of background, what they're accused of and what was really going on.
Yeah, so basically it came out this morning that this year he kind of settled a lawsuit with JP Morgan, and JP Morgan is being accused of, I need to, because they didn't admit to this, but they're paying the settlement. So I think we can kind of assume like they probably did this. So basically they would pay their clients, like their brokerage or advisory clients, anywhere from $1,000 to $365,000. And in return, those clients couldn't go to the SEC about potential securities violations. So, I mean, that's probably illegal. That's basically bribery, right? I mean,
Well, it's certainly some form of hush money, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. You pay someone $100,000, like they're probably not going to, or it's in the agreement that they can't go to the SEC. And I think it's just it kind of went under the radar. I think it's an important story, again, just highlighting some of the corruption in the banking sector. Like, this is somewhat commonplace, I suppose, and there are much bigger fines that have occurred. But this one just struck a chord with me as particularly egregious because I mean, they had agreements that kind of outlined it, right? And
Yep.
it was just very kind of upfront. And I'm glad the SEC did something. But again, it is really just a slap of the wrist. I think we can all agree. 18 million to JP Morgan. They have assets over $1.5 trillion. What does 18 million really do at the end of the day?
Well, it's probably not that much more than all the in quote bribes they're paying, really, is it?
Yeah, true. I mean, kind of ironic as well that a lot of these companies do kind of bribe politicians and stuff like that as well, or with like election campaign donations too. And they spend a lot more money than $355,000. They spend millions giving money to campaign officials. So bribery is kind of part and parcel with a lot of these large.
So what was the actual response from the SEC? How did they sort of deal with it? What were their comments?
Yeah, so they basically said that they use the term alleged that's what we allege. JP Morgan did hear that, and they had to be very specific and careful after last week. God forbid they
Well, we'll
make
come back to that because
saying,
yeah, that's very thick with irony, that one.
yeah. God forbid they make a mistake with traditional finance, but crypto, whatever. Um, yeah, so basically they just said like whether it's employment contracts, settlements, or elsewhere, you cannot include provisions that prevent individuals from contacting the SEC with evidence of wrongdoing. And then, personally, I would like the SEC to like kind of further investigate. Like if they had these clauses that they couldn't go to the SEC for wrongdoing, then why aren't we potentially investigating JP Morgan for those actual wrongdoings? Well, that's kind of a separate issue, right? And that should be treated as such. I mean, if you're paying money to clients to not go report bad stuff, you probably did bad stuff. Otherwise, you wouldn't be paying them. So I'll be interested to see if the SEC does anything moving forward with that. But again, JP Morgan is obviously a very powerful organization. So, we'll see what happens there.
So let's just talk about that a little bit more with this irony when you look back at last week, because we remember crypto, we had the Bitcoin ETFs we were talking about last week. A lot of sort of pushback and heavy scrutiny from the SEC. It got approved almost under duress, it felt like, when you read the sort of statement from the chairman, Gary Gensler. So what do you think that there's some sort of double standard going on here between what's happening in that area or some areas of the market and other areas that are very much the traditional banking rails that have been around for a very long time?
Yeah, I guess it's frustrating to me as it kind of, I mean, we don't make this all about crypto, but a little bit here I think is important as a juxtaposition in that, the traditional banking sector has its flaws clearly, as its corruption is rife. And the SEC is very consistent to point out like crypto scams, be careful. And I understand that lots of scams out there, right? No one's disagreeing with that. But what about pointing out the corruption in your own kind of system and your own things you're supposed to regulate as well? And I know that they, did put this lawsuit forward, but the rhetoric around the SEC is like anti-crypto, it's bad, it's scary, you got to watch out, you can't trust it. And I would argue that you can't trust traditional banking system either, clearly. So, I mean, crypto is open source. For example, you can clearly go see like if there's a problem in a coin, you can see it and you can do your own research. And I would say traditional banking system is anything but open source and trustless.
So what do you think? Do you think there are broader implications for the banking industry generally if leaders are acting in this way? Because JP Morgan is certainly a leader. I mean, they're not, this is not a regional bank. This is the biggest.
Yeah, I would say this makes me think that these practices are probably quite rife within the banking sector. I mean, if you have the biggest leader, I mean, this was the year to be a bank, right? Like the past year with the interest rates the way they were, banks are profiting more than ever. Commonwealth Bank here in Australia had their best year ever. JP Morgan had an incredible year. So if you're still in your like most profitable time and you're still engaging this way and still potentially breaking securities law, I mean, you got to ask questions as to why that is. And, should be able to operate as a normal bank, profit trillions or whatever, not trillions, but, significant amounts of money. And, shouldn't have to engage in this. So the fact that given the environment makes me seem that it is actually quite, the banking sector is quite rife with these things.
So bringing this back to gold, let's just think about this for a second, and I'd like to get your opinion on how gold fits into this story, because there's a little bit more irony in this, and it was pointed out in the article today that it's the famous JP Morgan quote that gold is money, everything else is credit. So there was a time way back in the early 1912 sort of period of time that JP Morgan, starting all of that massive conglomerate that ended up being, thought that gold was really important. Do you think that this is a solution perhaps to what we are seeing now, where you can't necessarily trust the regulators to get it right? You can't necessarily trust the banks to self-regulate. Like, how do you see gold fitting into this picture?
Yeah, I think the irony is that the man that created this company believed in gold a lot, and this company's kind of hasn't acted in accordance with that, that, and I think this is kind of bullish gold in that it shows at the end of the day, you can't trust these banks, and I think gold is the solution to that. And of course, I mean, JP Morgan himself thought that as well. So I don't know if you have any further thoughts on that, but very right.
I think there's certainly a role in everyone's portfolio to have some of it outside of the system, because what we're really talking about in my mind is the system itself, and saying, there's clearly issues with the system. We witnessed that last week with really what could only be described as a clown show with what happened in the crypto space with those BTC ETFs. And now we're seeing a different show, but it's still a show. It's still showing that underneath the system itself, there's a lot of issues at play. So, you really can't trust anything that you don't have control of yourself. So there's a role for that in everyone's portfolio. That's how I see it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a good way to end it. I mean, JP Morgan said it himself, so very valuable.
Yeah, and it might not look at it that the bank may not look at it quite the same way these days, but that's certainly where it was.
They definitely don't. They're not fans at all.
No, absolutely not. When you read some of this stuff. So, well, thank you so much for that today, Branko. Always interesting to get a different perspective on what's going on in the markets, particularly when the big boys get caught out a little bit. So, it's always worth paying attention to that. So thank you for that.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll chat again soon.